Religious trauma does not always end when you leave the religion or a cult. And I think that is something a lot of people still do not fully understand. Just because you've left doesn't mean you're suddenly okay. Just because you've physically left a belief system or a church or an organisation or a kingdom hall does not mean the nervous system, identity, and your body and mind have caught up yet. If someone has lived through religious or spiritual trauma, which is usually both in the same aspect, they may still carry it a long time after leaving, because it carries on living in their thoughts, it lives in the body, it can come out in behaviour, it can even affect relationships, and also in the way a person sees themselves. So it's very much tied to identity, sense of self, because it shows up as feeling guilt or panic when setting boundaries, for example, or feeling bad or unsafe for simply saying no. Fear of punishment, that's a big one. Even after you leave the belief system, you might still believe you're going to be destroyed or go to hell, whatever the punishment is. So you have intrusive thoughts around doom, judgment, hell, demons, or divine retribution. And then, of course, shame around sex, pleasure, identity, self-expression. And there's difficulty trusting yourself without some outside authority telling you what is right or wrong. So it then turns into, it can show up then as people pleasing because you're still looking for that authority. And then it manifests as over compliance, black and white thinking. So this is bad, this is good. Then you develop chronic anxiety or depression, panic attacks, and you become extremely hypervigilant. And you can start also experience disassociation from reality. And then you have, on the other hand, you've got grief and you've got loneliness and feeling lost because your whole identity was built around a group or a belief system or both. Or simply struggling to know what you actually think, want, or believe, like, who am I now? I'm no longer part of this, but what do I believe? And I think another important point here is that religious trauma can look like a lot of other traumas. And it is a trauma, but because it often trains people to override their instincts regarding the religious trauma and mistrusting their own body and their own intuition and instincts, it kind of pushes people to tolerate emotional harm and equate obedience with safety. And that's why a lot of people stay in these systems that are hurting them. And that is also why it can affect relationships, whether that's later on or in the moment, because you were trained to silence yourself, to doubt yourself or normalize harm in one environment. Then those patterns do not always disappear the moment you leave. In fact, as I wrote in my memoir, I carried those patterns with me and I kept repeating them years later. And this is exactly why it must be treated as a real trauma, a real traumatic experience, because the body and mind respond to chronic fear, shame, control, and threat the same way, whether the source is a parent, a partner, a cult, a church, a spiritual teacher, or a high control religious system. Your nervous system does not know the difference of where it's come from. It does not say, oh, it came from a religion, it doesn't count. No. Your nervous system sees it as the same thing. It registers it as danger, as loss of safety, loss of agency. You are not in control of your own survival. And then you have threat of abandonment. And as in most cases, there's emotional coercion, which is why religious and spiritual trauma deserves to be taken seriously, which is why I talk about it, I post videos, and I will not stop. because it's also important to realize that leaving does not automatically heal that trauma. Leaving is a beginning, yes, because you cannot heal in a place that's made you sick. But it is not the whole healing. Once you leave, that's a good start. It includes learning to trust your own mind again, because spirituality invades your thoughts. You have to learn to separate fear from truth. And you have to grieve the lost years, decades, loss of community, and the loss of belief. Because at one point, that belief gave you certainty. And you're having to learn to regulate your nervous system. You have to unpack shame. That's something that took me a long time. Rebuild an identity outside that system. Again, it's not an overnight process. You have to reclaim your right to question, choose, and think for yourself. And finding safe people who do not use belief as a weapon. So, if that has affected you, I just really wanted to put this clearly. You do not have to prove that the abuse was bad enough. If you left feeling fearful, ashamed, dysregulated, disconnected from yourself, or afraid to think freely, that matters, and it is a real trauma, and it deserves real care and healing process. Okay, it is not something to be dismissed. So please go to your GP, your health professional, get help, professional help. And then also, if that's something you want to do, you can add other things to it that help you feel safe, that teaches you to trust in yourself and to be in your body again and not have to look for an external source to make you feel like you are allowed to exist. Healing this kind of trauma can take time. Leaving is the first step, but you also have to treat it and acknowledge it as a real trauma. And that is one of the most important steps, is to not dismiss it and not invalidate it. And don't let others invalidate it either. Just because they don't understand doesn't mean it didn't have an impact. It did. If you're suffering, you've experienced trauma. That is your cue to look after yourself, prioritize your healing, prioritize feeling safe. So I will be posting more tips on what helped me personally, and people can take what resonates, leave what doesn't. There is no size, not one size that fits all. We're all individuals, we all respond to different things. But I will share it anyway in my next video. And if anything in that helps you, resonates you, interests you, feel free to explore it. But my main point is always, please, I do not give medical advice. Please speak to your medical professional GP about any issues, anything that you're feeling. They are there for a reason. So I will leave this video at that, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.